Welcome back. In this video, we're gonna make a start 3D modeling this building. You will first learn the techniques to draw the general shape of this building. Then, in following videos, we will look into the techniques that you need to model the architectural details. Let's get started. When you start modeling a building like this, one important decision that you have to make is whether you want to model the exteriors only or also the interiors. And that depends, of course, on your question or use of the model. In our case, we are gonna model only the exteriors. So basically it will be an empty shell building. At the end of this video, I will also demonstrate the technique that you would use if you also want to model the interiors of this building. As I already emphasized in the first video in this series, before you start modeling, it's very important to look at the building and its structural elements. What parts of the building do you want to model as separate objects, and what parts do you want to model as one object? In general, it's smart to create a rough subdivision between the roof and the rest of the building. And in our case, we want to make a general subdivision between the roof, the middle part of the building, and the lower part of this building, because these are structurally distinct elements, so it makes sense to model them as separate objects. However, in our approach, we're going to start model them as one object and then separate them in three separate objects. When you start modeling any object in Blender, you generally want to start with a sort of a base object, a so-called primitive, and you can find those at Add, Mesh, and then you have a couple of them at your disposal. With architecture, it's often smart to start with a cube and sometimes with a plane. So I go to Add the cube, and as you can see, it adds at the location, at this location of my 3D cursor. The 3D cursor has multiple uses in Blender. One of them is the spawning point of new objects. I can easily relocate the 3D cursor by going to the place that I want my new object to spawn from. I hold Shift. You can see at the left part of my screen also what buttons I'm pressing. And then right click. Shift and then right click. And then the 3D cursor appears at a different location where you clicked. And then when I do Add, Mesh, Cube, it adds directly on the location that I want to have the cube. So I hit X to delete this one. What I want to do next is to resize this cube so its sides align with the exterior of the walls of this building. So I have the Move tool selected in the toolbar. If you don't see the toolbar, you can hit T on your keyboard, T to hide it, T to show it. Probably the Select tool is selected in your toolbar, but select the Move tool. So we will start by going into top orthogonal perspective. So when you model from plans and from side views and sections, it's often smart to use these different orthogonal perspectives in Blender. These allow you to temporarily stay into a sort of 2D space, so you don't have to worry about the third dimension, and it makes modeling much easier. So for instance, you can also look at the building from this side, and then you can model from these different orthogonal perspectives. So I have the Move tool selected, and I will start by moving the cube into one of the corners of the building. As you can see, the cube covers the plan at the background, and much of the time when you're modeling from a plan or from other architectural drawing perspective, you want to see through the object that you're modeling and be able to see the plan or drawing behind it. So especially when it's very large, it completely obscures your view. So what we do is we turn on X-ray. So with the X-ray on, we can see through the cube and see the plan at the same time. The next thing is we go into edit mode of this cube to modify it. So edit mode is quickly entered by hitting Tab on the keyboard, or here at this menu you move between edit mode and object mode like this. So I'm going into a side perspective, and now it's very important because we want to select this face and drag it into that position. It's important to select face selection mode. So you can have vertex selection mode on, or edge selection mode, or face selection mode. And this allows you to select only faces or only edges or only vertices. So now I want to move this entire face, so I want to select only this face. I'm going back into the top orthogonal view, and I drag this face with the move tool into the right position. I don't have to turn the view to select that face. I can simply stay into this top orthogonal view and select this face as well. I zoom out and I drag this one into position. I zoom in for more precise movement. For now, don't worry about the slight misalignments that you see here. This is a little bit better, but these maps are of course originally hand drawn, so a perfect alignment is impossible, and if you try making the alignment perfect, you get non-straight corners, and that may make modeling much harder in the future. So we keep to 90 degrees corners now, because that was how the building was actually intended to be. So we have the outline of the building modeled like this. Now we want to modify the top and the bottom so it corresponds with the top of the roof and the bottom of the building. We're not modeling the basement for now, we're just using the lower part of the ground floor. So what I would do is I will select the top face, and now I can go into the front perspective. I could turn off X-ray now, move it up to here. Same thing with the lower side. So when I'm trying to align the lower side exactly with where this plan is located, it's very hard like this, because your movement is manual and you will never get there exactly. If you want to exactly position this face on top of this plan, you will have to use another technique called snapping. Snapping is activated here, this button, and there are various elements that you can snap to, snap target. So in this case we want to snap to a face. We want to snap to the face of this plan. So this plan is basically one big face, and we want to snap this face that we selected to this one. So whenever I start moving now, you can see that it automatically sticks to the level of the face that I have selected under my mouse cursor. I will turn off snapping now, but now I have perfect alignment with the plan. So the next thing is to create these different structural divisions of the building, the roof, the middle part, and the lower storefront. So for that we're going to use the loop cut tool. It's available here. You can click on it. When you move close to the object, you see that it will create a loop around the object. So it only works when you have a series of continuous four-sided faces next to each other. If there are holes, or if the object has irregular sided faces, like faces with 3 or with 5 or more sides, then this technique doesn't work. But now we have a neat cube without holes, so we can use this technique. So it has a loop cut and it will appear at the center of the object, but when I click the mouse and hold the mouse, it allows me to slide this into the right position. So for now I will Ctrl Z, because I want to see where I want to locate this loop cut. So I turn on transparency again, I get the loop cut tool, then I have to decide where I want to place it. So usually the floors are a good indication of where the structural divisions lie. So I click and I start dragging. When I accidentally click like this, because you're confused, because you just start learning this technique, go back to selection mode and do Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z until you're back to where you started. So I had this one placed. So I go to loop cut again. I will shift middle mouse button and I will click and drag. Put this until the top of the wall. Okay, so I will now deactivate the loop cut tool by selecting the select tool again. So what if you want to reposition these loop cuts? Then you have to select all the sides of the loop cut. And there's one quick way to do that, and that is to hold Alt on your keyboard and select one of the edges on the loop. And then it will automatically select the connected loop. So now I can move the loop to another position if I want to. One way to do is to use this tool to move it up and down. I will use the lower part of this floor as the end of this division, and then I will create later a separate model for this element here. And I do again Alt click here, and I will try to align this with the top of the wall like this. Pro tip, instead of using the move tool to move the edge loop, you could also use the edge slide tool. And that's available through a keyboard shortcut, and that one is GG, so double G, and then your edge loop will automatically start to slide alongside its perpendicular edges. If I hold shift, I move in very small increments and can have a very precise placement. So now we've created our structural divisions. The next step is to separate each part and make a separate object for roof, walls, and ground floor. So how do we do that? I will turn off X-ray for now, and I will turn on face select mode. And I'll show you another trick. In order to separate a part, you can simply select all the parts that you want to have separate from the main object, so like so. There's also a quick way to select face loops, similar to edge loops that I explained earlier. So I hit Alt and I select on the boundary between two faces, and it will select at once the entire loop. And then I hold Shift and I select also this one. So how do I separate this so it becomes a separate object? I use the shortcut P selection. So as you can see, now it created another object, cube 001 and cube 002. And we can do the same for the lower floors. So I hit Alt to select this one in edit mode. So you have to select the right object, go into edit mode, and then select these faces. And I could hit P again, but I want to show you also another way to access the separate function. It's simply right click, separate selection. So now I'm going out of edit mode again, and I have 1, 2, 3 objects, and they are over here in my outliner. If they are not yet in a collection called reconstruction, you should move them there now, and we can rename them. Double click. This is ground floor, this is upper floors, and this is roof. Okay, so we can now start to model a little bit more detail, starting with the roof. For that I will turn on these cross sections again. I select the upper object of these three, and I will turn on X-ray, and I will go into front view. So we have not really a perfect alignment between the front view and the cross section, so we have to choose one. Which one are we going to use to represent the roof? So we're going to go into front orthographic view, and what we do then is we select this middle face, so the top face, and I start scaling. You could use the scale tool here in the toolbar, or use the S key on your keyboard. That's a little bit more convenient. If I use scaling like this, S, and I look on top, you can see that it's scaled in all directions. That's not what we want. we actually wanted to scale it only on the red axis, and the red axis is of course the x-axis. So we hit S, start scaling on the X, and now of course I want to see it in front view to see if I match this. So there's S and an X, and we roughly go for the outline. We can add all these details later, and then we can also select the lower part in order to align this. How do we select those? Because if I hide this one, this one, this one, you can see there's no face at the bottom. That's just the way that we modeled it. So what we want to do is to select these edges. So I'm in edit mode, and then I have to switch to edge select mode. So I select that edge and that edge. And then again, I'm going into front view, and I hit SX. I can do the same with this SX again. As you can see, I'm not precisely following this outline here as represented on the architectural drawing on the cross section. There's a slight misalignment between this cross section and the plan. So I could choose to follow either the plan or the cross section. I could modify my entire model. But if I decide to modify the model, I should also modify the lower parts as well, because if I turn this one on, you can see that there is a slight misalignment here as well, and maybe the drawing is a little bit rotated. Yeah, that should have been set up from the more accurately from the beginning if I wanted to have a better alignment, but for now I'm satisfied with this, and I'm not gonna further tweak this model because it will introduce other difficulties as well. So as you can see, this roof has somewhat of it's a slight pitch. I could model that as a separate object. That may be smart because there's also this overhang on the side. But for now I will show you the technique that I would use to quickly create a pitch like this. So we're going to use the loop cut technique again for this one. So we pick the loop cut tool over here, and you choose go to the corner here, and I choose this one. So now I just clicked, so it exactly snaps into the center. Go back to select tool, and then I make sure with the edge select tool that I have the center edge selected, and I go into side view again, and then I'm moving this one so it has a slight pitch. As you can see, there's now a small gap in between the roof and the walls. That's because we mold everything as an empty shell. Well, later we're gonna add some gutters, of course, but if you don't want to have these gaps here, we can start editing the upper floors object. So I hit tab to go into the upper floors object, and for now I will hide the roof so I can see, and then I will select with edge selection mode active. I will select all these, and then I hit F on the keyboard, F, to create a new face. So when I show the roof now, there's no gap here. This was as far as I wanted to go in this video in terms of explaining the techniques that you need to reconstruct the general outline of this building in 3D. I promised in the beginning that I would also demonstrate to you the approach that you would take when you also want to reconstruct the interior. That means you have to reconstruct the inner faces and the interior separation walls as well. So I would start by hiding the collection that we created the exterior in and create a new collection that I will call Reconstruction version 2 for now. And in the same way that I would start with modeling the exterior of this building, I would start with a cube. By the way, you don't have to follow along. This is just meant as a demonstration. I will use also a couple of other techniques that I haven't explained so far. I will quickly mention them and tell you how I use them. So I'm going in X-ray mode again, hit tab to go into edit mode, and I will align the sides of the cube with the wall. Then to make the corner, I will use the loop cut technique again that we also discussed in this video, but I'm using a shortcut, Ctrl R, to quickly place a loop cut like this, and then selecting this face. And then I'm using another technique, because if I start moving like this, I get a diagonal line. That's not what I want. I want to extrude from this face downwards like so. So I use E for extrude. Extrusion is also a tool available to you here, but again, I'm using the shortcut E. And again, E. And I can also use it to do extrude here and extrude this last part. Now I want to make sure that this wall aligns with that part of the wall where it's ending up. So I have to make sure that this loop cut aligns with that loop cut. For that I'm using snapping again. So I use edge snapping. So I move this one and align it, snap it to that edge. And also with the faces on this side. So this face has to align exactly with that face. So like that. So to reconstruct this wall with opposing faces, it's quite easy. I use a tool called Bridge Faces, so right mouse button, bridge faces, and it creates this in between space. So back to the top perspective again, back to transparency, selected this one. I'll make sure that I have to select the face, extrude, create another loop cut over here, extrude, and in the same way I would connect these two wall ends by using the Bridge Faces tool. So what I should do now next is to select all the upper faces of these walls and move them into position to align with the floor height about here. So then we still have the interior walls over here. So I could say this is exterior walls. So we make them as a new object. So in the same way I would hit Shift A to create a cube, go into edit mode and align these. So to make sure that this face exactly meets the side of this exterior wall, I'm using snapping again. So in this case edge snapping, I move this one over here and it snaps to the exterior wall. So I move this all the way over here, but I can also move it into here, use the extrude technique, extrude, extrude, and I snap again to this side. Select this face, extrude all the way over here, extrude a little bit more, extrude this one in that direction, select that face, extrude in that direction, Ctrl R for a loop cut, extrude. Oh. As soon as if I've activated loop cut tool, it also switches on edge select mode. That may be a little bit confusing sometimes. I have to make sure that I have face select mode again selected. Extrude this one. And as you can see here, there's a little bit of a angle change in the wall. So I will first move it over here and then use the move tool. While I have snapping on, it sticks to the side of the wall. We have a small wall still here that we should model. Then this one and extrude. Oh, again, same problem. Extrude. Okay, for now I'm not gonna model these interior walls. So I want to move the top sides to align with the top sides of the exterior walls. There's a fast way to select all these, and that's to go into a side perspective, and with X-ray on I drag and select over the top of the walls, and then all the faces, all the top faces are automatically selected thanks to the transparency in the selection, and then I will move them up and use snapping to make sure that they exactly align with the top of the exterior walls. I will interior walls. Of course, it still needs windows and doors, but this is the idea if you also want to model the interiors.